Hello everyone, and a warm welcome from the Israel Economic and Trade Mission in Berlin. My name is Simon Stefken. I'm working here as a business development manager. And with us is also Esther Elias. She's the commercial consul at the Israel Economic and Trade Mission in Berlin. And before we get started and I say some words on what we are doing here in our office, I would like first of all to thank our great partners for today's event. First of all, Dr. Yaki Dayan, founder of EdTech Israel. He's the co-organizer of this session. It's a great pleasure working with you, and I hope this will be a great kickoff for further activities between the Israeli EdTech ecosystem and the German market. And then we have Tobias Himmerich, CEO of Eduvation. Thank you very much for being with us and moderating the panel. And we also have Paula Risius, who will give us some empirical insights in the end. She's a researcher at the German Economic Institute. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. Welcome. And also to our other distinguished panelists. It's a great pleasure to have you all with us today. And you'll get introduced in the first panel later on. And before we get started with a short introduction on the Israeli EdTech ecosystem by Yaki, I would like to say some few words on what we are doing here. So we are the Israel Economic and Trade Mission. We are the official representative of the Israeli economy in Germany. We have three pillars of our work. We get a lot of interest from Israeli companies who want to penetrate the German market, and we assist them with market research and to get a foot in the door in the German market. And we also offer innovation scouting for German companies that are interested in Israeli technologies. And we also organize events and webinars like this one, and we are present on trade shows both in Germany and in Israel. And so we are very happy to talk today about this pressing topic of skill shortage in Germany. And we are looking forward to engage in the discussion between the ecosystems of both countries and create synergies on this topic. And yeah, this is it already from my side. And I wish us all a nice afternoon here in our virtual meeting room. We have some nice Tel Avivian beach in our background. So we get some sun here in Berlin as well. And yeah, I wish us all a fruitful event. And thanks again to all the panelists and speakers. And I hand over to you, Yaki. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Hi, everybody. Esther, you don't want to say a few words?
I give the floor to Simon because he made such a great effort. But I would say that we're celebrating 1 year with him today. So happy anniversary. And thank you all for joining us. Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for joining, and thank you, Esther and Simon. It's really a great opportunity to start, building again the international activities after such a long, let's say, forced stop that we had over the last 18 months or so. And I very much looking forward for the opportunity to meet again in person, whether in Tel Aviv, Berlin, San Diego, or any other place on the planet. So my name is Yaki Dayan from EdTech Israel. Let me share a short slide presentation. Where is it? Yeah. Okay, so actually EdTech Israel started in 2014, so we are celebrating kind of 7 years of social impact. The mission of EdTech Israel has been and continues to be to bridge between the international markets and the Israeli EdTech ecosystem. I do believe that by creating opportunities for companies in Israel to reach international markets, it helps not only making an impact on the world, but also makes an impact on the Israeli economy as well. So that's something that we started in September 2014. And I think over the years, I had the pleasure of meeting so many of you guys in different events around the world. So far, we organized over 22 delegations to the most important, successful events in the US, CGSV, Land Launch, GT China, EdTech Asia, EdTech Review in India, and so on and so forth. Each delegation is an opportunity for Israeli companies to reach to international markets and engage with investors, business partners, and make their brand aware to the rest of the global ecosystem. I'm holding my, I very much want to be in the opportunity to create again a summit, a physical summit here in Israel. The last one was in June 2019. Unfortunately, June 2020, June 2021 were not such good time slots for having a physical event in Israel. Hopefully, June 2022 will be different. In the last one, we had about 120 international audience, close to 1,000 attendees, investors from all over the world. That's another way for the Israeli EdTech ecosystem to meet investors and professionals from around the world. And if someone wants to know more about the EdTech ecosystem in Israel, fortunately, just a couple of months ago, we did an effort together with Holon IQ, with whom we partner since 2017, and we created the Israeli EdTech 50 listing, which is on the Holon IQ webpage. I think that this is probably the most comprehensive list of EdTech companies that are in Israel that were selected to this list based on objective standards by Holon IQ. It's not my list, it's a collaboration with their methodology and databases. And over there you can see a map of all the Israeli EdTech companies, or let's say 50 of the Israeli EdTech companies based on workforce and skills, management systems, language learning, assessment and test prep, and so on and so forth. And today our focus is definitely on the workforce and skills, which I believe that, one of the things that really happened during COVID is that it's, let's say, pushed so many companies to new ways of operating, new ways to train their employees, and also new challenges based on digital skills that are required today more than ever. And one of the things that maybe characterize many of the companies in this specific segment is the fact that Israel is today home to 50-something unicorns and to over 250 international R&D centers that exist in Israel, which makes the Israeli, let's say, companies in everything related to workforce and skills, if they want to reach out to companies like Google, Apple, Microsoft, whatever, or at the same time, any of the other 50-something Israeli unicorns that are out there, they can do it locally in Israel and then penetrate to their international other subsidiaries or headquarters that they have. So there is a lot of activity that is being done in that sport of the EdTech ecosystem. And I'm delighted to have today with us 3 companies that represent Israel's best solutions in that respect. When Simon called me and said, we need companies in Israel to speak about skill gap, I said, of course, we have many that can actually be excellent candidates for that. And each of the companies that we have today is offering a different solution. So they do not compete, they complement and they definitely, each one of them is targeting different segment of or different part of the problem. So without further ado, I will hand over to Tobias to continue with the panel. And again, thank everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Yaki, and a warm welcome from my side. Thanks for the invitation. We'll just quickly introduce Eduvation so that you have an idea of who we are. Because Eduvation, and my name, Tobias Himmerich, I'm the CEO of Eduvation here in Germany. And Eduvation is the largest EdTech association here in Germany. So we mainly support EdTech companies and EdTech startups within Germany, and also foreign EdTech companies entering the German market. And we help them with market analysis, with market entrance strategies. And we also here in Germany, we also organize the EdTech startup areas on all education events here in Germany. So all big Eduvation trade shows, education conferences. There's always a startup area that's organized by us. And so we also work together with the government to develop supporting programs and so on for EdTech companies and EdTech startups. And so I'm very, very glad to be part of the event today to kind of connect the Israeli EdTech society and EdTech world with the German market. So thanks for that. And I think we should just jump into it. Of course, first we need to know what the 3 EdTech companies that we've invited, what they are actually doing. So I would pick one of you to start presenting yourself. I don't know if you have a presentation prepared or if you just want to start talking and present yourself. And whoever wants to go first on my list, it's Roy. So welcome. And if you could just briefly present yourself and the company and what you're actually doing.
Sure. So my name is Roy. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called ThriveDX, which we recently merged with another company to create what we now call ThriveDX, which is a global digital transformation company. I'll share a few slides. I'll do it quickly. Don't worry. So the concept of ThriveDX as a group now is to tackle or to address the digital transformation training or digital transformation education globally. So we tackle 2 main problems. One is the talent shortage, mostly of technical skills, from cybersecurity to data analysis and more, which is the fact that right now we need millions, actually 150 million new people in the market, and we need to reskill people to do that, or to get into these positions. And also the skills gap. So it's not just bringing more people into the market, but also the people that are already working in the industry are suffering from lack of skills, and skills are changing so rapidly. So companies, enterprise need to keep their workforce always ready. To solve this problem, we as ThriveDX, we develop both reskilling and upskilling solutions. Our solutions starting from what we call online bootcamps. So we developed bootcamps in cybersecurity, in data analysis, in other fields of expertise that take people from 0 to employed. Our main focus started in cybersecurity, and now we are expanding into other positions. And we do this in partnerships with universities around the world. So we launch these education hubs globally, where companies actually send their employees to our solutions, but these solutions are being provided in partnership with leading universities. In the US alone, we have more than 20 leading universities and other 20 colleges. Globally, we are working with dozens of others. So we've built a very, very strong solution in this combination of ThriveDX and the university partnerships. In addition, we also have on the same learning platforms, we also develop upskilling programs. So while we focus on the reskilling of new people, we also focus on different solutions to upskilling the workforce within a specific company. It means providing them awareness training, advanced executive workshops, hands-on practical training for developers, and also hands-on practical training for IT and security. So eventually we see this learning journey, as we like to call it, from the classroom to the boardroom, which is our approaches at ThriveDX. As of today, we trained more than 20 million employees globally in our group. We have hundreds of enterprise partners, more than 40 university partners, and working in about 30 countries. So that's about it.
Perfect. Thanks. And one quick question before we switch to the next. Are you already in the German market? Or
yeah, it's a great question. So from a upskilling point of view, we are working with several companies in DACH, in Germany, in Austria, and Switzerland. We have many companies from Lufthansa to Bosch to Volkswagen and others that are actually working with our solutions. But now we are looking to expand both in the education space in Germany and their German region, and also in the corporate space. So definitely we are very interested in the German market right now.
Yeah, cool. We'll come back to that later, but first the next one on the list so that we'll get an overview. And on my list, it's Shahar. If you want to start and present yourself and your solution and the company. You're welcome first, by the way.
Thanks, Tobias. I'm Shahar. I'm the founder and CEO of Stoke Talent. We got acquired by Fiverr about, I don't know, a month and a half ago, so it's pretty fresh. What we're doing, I didn't prepare slides, but I will pull one up just for the heck of it, so I won't be the odd person in the crowd. We built Stoke under the understanding that the world of workforce is significantly changing. And there's clear forecasts that within 10 years, more than 60% of the global workforce will not be employees anymore. They will be freelancers. Already today, we're starting to see these signs of happening. COVID has accelerated the transition. And we're standing in time where it's almost a perfect storm for a change in the workforce. Pace of change is constantly accelerating. People don't stick to the same company for more than 2 years. The average is down to about 18 months now, 18 to 19 months. It's never been easier to acquire a new skill. There's so many online platforms like Udemy, Coursera, Masterclass. Like you can pick up any skill you want anywhere in the world. You're not bounded to a specific location. And organizations are realizing they constantly need to pump new blood into an organization. On the other side, we're witnessing a change in a generational shift. Millennials, Gen Z, everybody keeps talking about millennials and Gen Z anywhere, but they have different expectations from life, they expect different social contract. They have no intention of being anyone's employees. They want to do things they're passionate about. They want to move around. They want to travel the world. Cloud computing has enabled anybody to provide services to almost any company around the world. And so this binding that we got used to understanding over the last 50 years, where someone works at a company until retirement or switches 2 or 3 jobs along the way, is no longer that course. Stoke is enabling organizations with the platforms that helps them redefine the DNA on flexible workforce. How do you bring in the right DNA, the right talent into the organization? As we think about upskilling and reskilling, we're saying a lot of times the people that you hire today will not be able to possess the skills that you need in 2 or 3 years. So how do you constantly pump new blood into the organization of people that have the skills that you need and constantly augment the team with fresh ideas? So that's what Stoke provides, pretty much a platform to help you build a talent cloud of flexible workforce.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for the presentation. And one quick question, did the COVID situation change your expansion plans? Was there any significant impact in your thoughts of entering, for example, the German market?
So we are in the German market, by the way. We have a few accounts in the German market. I think what COVID did was actually what we thought is going to happen over 5 to 7 years happened within 3 to 5 months. So when we started talking about the world is going remote, Yaki and I were talking before COVID. We can go back to my presentation from, I think it's 2019. when I was talking about remote work and changes. And people were like, yeah, you know, it's only specific sectors. And then the world was forced into remote work, and things will never be the same again. And so I think what people never thought possible turned into the new norm. So it's a lot easier for people to understand now that remote work is possible, flexible work is possible, people holding 2 or 3 jobs at the same time is possible. People quitting their jobs. We just seen what happened in the United States over the last 6 months with the Great Resignation. People are leaving their steady income and moving into freelancing model. And so, so in short, COVID did a great service. Unfortunately, that's what it took to educate the market that the world is changing.
Yeah. I agree. So, Avi, then you are the not the least, but the last, at least on my list. So welcome once again. Good to have you here. If you would then briefly introduce yourself and your company.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm Avi, I'm the founder and CEO of Eduvation, and I'm the last in the panel that didn't give up for the giants and still running as a startup. So I'm the last standing now. I'll give a quick overview on Eduvation. So basically, the talent shortage is actually what we're tackling, okay? And we're operating for the last 7 years in Israel, and in the last 1.5 years in Germany. We have a general manager, a local general manager in Berlin, and a team. Her name is Karin Shalev-Shugel. I'm sure some of you know her. We're working with a wide range of customers, from tech companies like Google, Monday, Facebook, and Wix, to more traditional places because of our unique use cases, which I'll go over in a minute. And basically, the problem that we're looking at is that 70% of the workforce will need to somehow upskill or reskill itself in the next 5 years. We know that we will have millions of new jobs, and we will have millions of jobs that will disappear. This is from the last report last year of the World Economic Forum, Future of Jobs. And what we're doing around it is solving the talent shortage by offering academy as a service for companies to upskill and reskill current employees and train to hire new ones. So basically, we have 3 leading use cases. The first one is a train to hire, when we're coming to companies and helping them build their pipeline and doing boot camps around R&D, data, product, and digital marketing in order to try to bring talent in a different way. Yaki mentioned that in Israel, there are around 6 unicorns, everybody fighting on the same talent, and we see companies that trying to build talents from different perspectives. The other use case is upskill and reskill, and this is basically what 90% of what we did in Germany was around upskilling in data areas. We have a product of Data Academy, where we're coming over and helping companies to become more data-driven with data literacy skills and data tools. And the last use case is companies and governments and nonprofits that taking us for upskilling and reskilling the ecosystem around different KPIs like government relations, diversity and inclusion, or other areas that they want to promote. We're not just a training provider. The Academy as a Service is doing everything that the company needs in order to build and operate their internal academy. And we saw that in Germany with Mittelstand, they not always have enough internal resources to do so, not money, just like the people and the human capital to build the training and operate it. And this is exactly what we're doing. And when we're saying Academy as a Service, sometimes we're coming to customers as building everything from scratch and doing everything, including the training itself. And sometimes we're just helping the company build its own academy and doing all the operation, like the business process outsource that they need in order to make it in scale. So happy to chat more about the German market, which is fascinating and really different from the Israeli one. Thank you.
Yeah, Thanks for your presentation. And that exactly leads to my first question. I mean, since you're already in Germany serving German customer and clients, what is your, I mean, is there one point that you would say that's the most strange or different or exotic thing that you've experienced on the German market? Something that you would say from your perspective, you know, coming to Germany is unique, or what surprised you?
I don't know if surprised me. Everybody told me that, but we saw it, and I really think that the culture differences and it's more systematic and it's huge. It's really bigger and it's just working differently. So for companies in Israel that want to operate in Germany, the best advice is hire someone from Germany to lead the activity and be the general manager. If you really want to succeed, it's just maybe, I don't know if a different language, but a different face and the speed of things that happening maybe in New York or in Tel Aviv are different from there to Berlin or even to London. So every place with its own specificizations. And I think in Germany, it takes more time to get maybe to the customer and build your credibility. But once you're starting to work and you're good, it's huge and it's for long relationships. And we choose the German market to be the first market for elevation out of Israel, just from these reasons. I think the opportunity is the biggest in Europe for sure. And the German market is really advanced, but it's now getting to the point of automation, which affecting all the market and all the talent around it. And then when you balance between the cool scene of unicorns in Berlin, where you can work really fast in English, and the other Mittelstand or huge companies that you need to work more slowly but surely and think big, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. I mean, I can definitely, you know, see the points, and even you're living in Germany, you're totally right. But Roy, coming to you again, did you have to change your market entrance strategy and adjust it at some time, or are you now thinking you should have done it a bit different now that you're already in the German market?
Yeah, I think definitely I can relate to what Avi said about getting into Germany from Germany. I think that trying to, and maybe it's true for a lot of different markets, although I think, I mean, a lot of time we say that, you know, you need Americans to sell to Americans, et cetera, and it makes, you know, it makes sense. However, from an operational point of view, I think that even having boots on the ground, I mean, here in Israel, sometimes I feel that I can have Americans sell to Americans, but they can be based here. And I think one of the main things about the entry to the German market is actually also working with local people that know the market. I feel that although Germany, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, although Germany is a very big country, there is still something that it's very based on personal relationship, connections, network, people who know people who recommend you to other people among C-levels that are decision makers in different companies, which is not necessarily unique to Germany, but it is not typical. Maybe it's a bit different in the US or in other places. So one of the main things that we've learned here is that our goal with Germany is to get several big accounts, like I mentioned, with Lufthansa, with Volkswagen, with Bosch, and others, also others in Switzerland, in Austria, but it's different in the region. And now, based on these accounts and based on the good market customer feedback that we have, now we are taking this and actually go to expansion. So the change we did is not immediately try to tackle the market, but actually try to do it much more like as a pinpoint focused effort on through 3, 4, 5 big accounts that we put all our efforts to close them. And now that we close them, we have good customer feedback. We now go to other accounts and show them our success with these accounts. So that's the change that I did. I don't know if it's unique to the German market, but it's not the same strategy that we did in other market. That was much more mess, you know, marketing, bombing, digital channels, which is not the way we did it in Germany.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, Germany is not as centralized as most of the other European countries. So there's not one capital, which is also the economic capital. So it's just way more spread out, and you have to be everywhere. But Shahar, I mean, since you're all in Germany already, but from your experience, how important would you say is it to have, a German-speaking German-speaking people, a German-speaking offer, or would you say you could, from your perspective, you could also kind of enter the market with just an English offer, just English speaking people? What is your experience?
Yeah, so I have to say, I think the type of companies that we target, which are more growth tech companies or media agencies, most of them are very savvy in English. And so, we don't have marketing material in German. We don't have, we don't specifically build ads for German market. It's all in English, and we still get inbound traffic from Germany. So from the get-go, I would say penetrating in English works well. Probably when you want to expand and go beyond the initial, you might want to invest. The platform is very easily translatable, but most of our German customers are using the English version, and it works just fine for them. And so I don't think that, again, obviously depends on the offering. I guess if you're selling to the large corporate, to Mercedes and Bosch, and you'll find a lot more different types of users that might not be savvy in English. That wasn't the case with us. With us, it was pretty straightforward. I don't think we don't have a lot of customers in Germany compared to the US market, but even within those, I don't think there's anyone that's actually asked us or using the interface in German.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, I can totally share your view. Even here in, living and be based in Germany, most of the tech-orientated companies, their company language is English anyways. But only if you want to expand then into the Mittelstand, which is the small and medium-sized companies that are just offer their services and products here in Germany, then I would say, from my perspective, that is exactly what you said. That's the boundary then where you have to switch languages. But yeah, totally agree. Is there? I mean, from your Shah, from your experience now, would you continue with your strategy and your market entry like you did now, or Shah, would you say now we've experienced it that way and we have to change something entering the German market?
Yeah, to be honest, I think the market that we're in is so large. And I think that even if I don't change anything, we can probably grow, 5 to 10x within Germany without changing anything in the platform. And so I think to actually change anything, we need to, when we get to maximizing the market, then say, oh, how do we get the last 30% or 40%? Then we might say, okay, we got to do something different. But I think there's such a huge market right now in where we're at that we don't need. Again, the platform support German. So if you want to use a platform in German, you can. Am I going to advertise in German? Am I going to do dedicated German activity? Not in 2022, not at this point. Might change.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Thank you. And Roy, coming back to you, is there any, obstacles, differences, problems that you've experienced? I mean, here in Germany, for example, data protection is one of the big issues everyone is talking about. Did you experience that?
Yes, and for example, one of the things we've learned in Europe in general, but with emphasis on Germany, is, for example, our solutions, most of our solutions are SaaS-based. And one of the things that we've learned is, for example, for several customers in the German market, there was a demand or more emphasis on on-prem solution. For example, taking the product that is running on servers that is not in Germany, or even in Germany, but not private servers of the company, and create a version that can run locally on the company's servers. So in a way that no data of employees, think about the company with hundreds of thousands of employees like Bosch, let's say we run phishing campaigns against their employees to test their cyber savviness, etc. the company, the companies in Germany, and specifically in several industries like, from big corporations to finance to healthcare, were much more, again, interested in protection of data, in privacy of their employees. The GDPR aside, even from, of course, GDPR we can follow GDPR rules also by running it on our servers on the SaaS version, but still they had a much more interest in having something locally, and that gave them, peace of mind. Also running it with a local company, whether it's our company, signing with a local entity, or an entity in Europe and not an entity in Israel. So these are the kind of things that I've experienced. But again, it's probably different than what Shahar and the others maybe experienced, because it's the large German enterprise. It's very traditional companies, hundreds of years old, some of them. So I don't know if that's a good comparison to the more flexible techie companies.
Yeah, just open the question, Avi. What is your experience?
Yeah, so we saw the same differences. Working with tech was one thing, but working with German more traditional companies was another thing. We have a learning report where we're measuring the advancement of the knowledge, and most times we're bringing it more personalized. And here we needed to do it in a more aggregated way. It's not just GDPR, it's GDPR and workers union and other things within the big companies. Another thing, when you're talking about marketing and inbound, so most days we can work and target through Facebook or LinkedIn in the personas that we're working in the companies. And here Facebook was not that good. LinkedIn was okay. And then we found out that everybody on Xing. So you really need to better understand what's happening in the region and what companies are looking for. When we're coming from a content perspective, when we did everything in English, it brought some kind of companies. And just when we brought the things also in German, we were able to speak with other companies that we're targeting.
Yeah, perfect. And just one question. I think you already said that you have one employee in Germany. Was there anything, with setting up kind of an office with all the regulations? Did anyone have, experience with, hiring someone in Germany? What was your experience then?
Yeah, so we have a few workers in Germany. It just, you need to understand the local laws. It's different, like there are more vacation days, there are more local holidays. And once you know all the regulations, you're good to go. But I don't think it's like something that is really different from getting to hire people in other regions.
Yeah, okay. And Shahar, just one question. I mean, since you have clients in Germany, then what is, would you say that you have clients that are in the typical Mittelstand already? I mean, since you said you are planning, I mean, it's working in English, your marketing is working in English, your product is working in English. Would you say that you are already in the Mittelstand, and that you have clients that you would kind of say that's Mittelstand for me?
I probably need to very well understand where does Mittelstand start and begin.
Exactly.
Right. So, by the way, I just had a conversation. I've been in a variety of companies all my life. When we say SMB, I mean one thing, right? SMB. Yeah. Some companies define SMB companies up to 3,000 employees, and so I don't know where exactly is the line drawn for Mittelstand, where it begins and where it ends. Exactly. So maybe we can. I'll throw the question back at you, Tobias, before I reply.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, that's even in Germany, there's not like a clear definition of what actually is Mittelstand. Usually when you talk with someone, people kind of identify themselves as Mittelstand if the company is still kind of family owned. And there are some banking rules, under 25 million turnover, under 250 people. That's, from the banking perspective in Germany, identified as small, medium-sized, but again, medium-sized, if you leave the small ones and you just say medium-sized, which is then Mittelstand translated one-to-one, is still going up to 5,000 people. So even the word is difficult, but it mainly depends on what the company itself sees it.
Yep. So we are playing then totally playing in Mittelstand. Our focus market is, again, as I mentioned, tech companies in probably A to C round. And so these are companies usually with a few dozen to a few hundred employees. Probably the largest we're going after are 2,000 employees, not even 5,000 for me. I already define it as kind of scratching the enterprise level. There's hierarchy, structures, processes. So it's a different type of selling. And so that's definitely the market we're playing at today. That's the market we're fitting. Again, I think to the previous examples, obviously selling into, as Roy said, into the Bosch and Mercedes, and it's like these are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands employees. That's a different category. We're actually not trying to play in that category today. So we're totally in that Mittelstand. I enjoy saying the word, so I'll repeat it multiple times.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah, perfect. I mean, I have still, 10 questions on my sheet, but we've talked for half an hour already. So I would, do you have any, advice, any last word that you could give, young companies or 10 companies that want to enter the German market? Just maybe one quick sentence or so. Roy, if you want to start, and then the other two.
Yeah, I'll say one sentence that I think that Israeli companies specifically immediately think about the US market, which, by the way, still makes sense in many cases. But I think that Europe in general and Germany specifically, this is a market that is a very, very big market, and we should pay more attention to this market.
Cool. Thank you. Avi, you're...
Yeah, I think in corporate training, more than 50% is probably in the US as a market, but the growth rate in Europe and in South Asia is really higher. And when we're looking at Europe, we're looking at Germany as a great opportunity for young companies coming over, just like slowly but surely. And it's a different phase. And I think around the Mittelstand definition, what I experience is that it's more a state of mind than a clear definition of size or something. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Shahar?
Yeah, I'll answer a bit differently. I think that, and that's more to the German market than Israeli companies penetrating the German market. I think the German market needs to realize that, again, the world has gotten flatter, and a lot of the challenges in skilling and finding skills actually outside the German market, but that can augment the German teams. And so our German clients are leveraging skilled workers around the world to help them execute on their mission. Some of them, by the way, a lot of them are German-speaking people in Panama, the US, Southeast Asia, wherever that is. So even if you need German-speaking people, they don't necessarily have to be on the ground in Germany. And so how do you start thinking around solving your skill gap or attending to the skill gap, not just within who's ever located where the company is?
Yeah, perfect. Then thanks to all of you. And I'll ask Simon whether we should stop our discussion after half an hour, or if there are some questions left. But I think I'll just hand over to Simon again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for this discussion. Yeah, there are no questions for now in the Q&A section or the chat. I encourage the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I think also Avi, Roy, and Shahar will be willing to answer them also in written form. And yeah, at this point, I will hand over again to Yaki, who will moderate the second part, and to Paula. And we're looking forward to the input.
Well, thank you. You know, maybe I will add a few words about walking on the journey from Israel to the German market. You know, I've been in international sales and business development for too many years, up until 2009. Some of my last trips to Europe before I did a PhD in education were to Düsseldorf almost on a monthly basis. And what I learned is that it's easier as an Israeli to sell to Germany than to an American to sell to Germany, or to an Englishman to sell to Germany, and of course, a Frenchman trying to sell to Germany. And you know, one of the things that always I think it's part of the dynamics of the relationship is that for an Israeli, English is a second language. For German person, English is a second language, which many times I found myself with German partners making efforts to understand them, and they making efforts to understand me much better than maybe on the same level between an American and a German person, or an English person and German person. And again, I'm not speaking about the French. So definitely I think that and if you recall from the Israeli telecom industry, for many years we had like a trend in Israel. There were companies that were going to the US market first, but everyone from the Zitzapil brothers, from the Rad Group, etc., it was always Europe first, Germany first, and the US later, and they were doing very, very good. So I think that in terms of a strategy, I strongly advise to Israeli companies not to neglect the German-speaking market and Germany in particular. And now we are entering the second part of the webinar today, the conversation with Nirit and Paula. And Nirit can definitely bring the Israeli/international view. But Paula, I know that you and as a member of the German Economic Institute, you do have data that we highly value in order to understand better the German market and not just go by feelings. So I invite you to share with us your findings and your thought, and then we will move over to Nirit and have a conversation.
Thank you very much. So I hope you can see my screen already. I guess so. Thank you very much for having me. I'm here speaking for the German Economic Institute, and my goal today is to make you more familiar with the situation in the German labor market, and also to give you a brief introduction to the qualification system we have here and into the changing competence needs that are present in Germany. So let me just start with a brief overview over the skill shortages we have in Germany. So when we speak about skill shortages, it's not actually about skills, but more about occupations, because the German system is very focused on occupations and on degrees, as you will see. And this chart shows how many skilled workers are lacking in different professions. So for example, in geriatric nursing, there are 17,520 people missing. How do we come up with these numbers? Well, we take the number of open job positions. We have official statistics about that. And we subtract the number of unemployed people in the respective profession, and we also call this a skill gap. So as you can see, this is only the top 10 of professions with skill shortages. Overall, there are many, many more jobs that have skill shortages, and overall, Germany lacks 243,701 skilled workers. This is what we came up. The main areas you can see here are the health sector, education and social work, but also the building sector. But there are many, many more areas Germany is actually lacking skilled workers at. As I already said, the German system is very focused on professions, and training on the job is rather rarely a thing in here, and it's more about trainings that take several years. So we have a very strong vocational education and training system where the degrees you can achieve take 2 to 4 years to achieve. And training on the job only happens in rather fastly developing areas. For example, you could be an IT specialist without having received any formal training, but it's more difficult to work as a carpenter, plumber, or tax consultant. And in some jobs, it's even impossible to work without formal training. So, for example, in nursing, you need to have a formal degree in order to work in the job. So as you can well imagine, German firms do not just say, okay, we have a skill shortage, that's fine. Of course, they react to it. So for one example is that they try to activate a workforce they do not have right now, like older people that leave the market at around 65 years to 67 years. Another approach firms take is that they try and recruit skilled workers from other countries, which is not always easy and sometimes also has some legal restrictions, which makes it more difficult. The third approach I want to present to you, of course, there's more than I will present here, is training apprentices. Again, we have a dual system. So part of the training happens in the firm and part of the training happens in vocational schools. And the final path to react to skill shortages I want to present to you here is, of course, continuing education in order to increase productivity. And this is also necessary not to increase productivity, but to participate in continuing education, because megatrends like sustainability and digitalization demand new competences. And I will now want to have a look at how digitalization changes skill needs in Germany. We asked German enterprises in 2020 what expectations they had about competence requirements for the future, and 4 in 5 companies expected that new competence requirements would arise. Moreover, almost 1 in 2 companies believed that new fields of activity would emerge within the company during the next 5 years. But despite those big changes the firms see coming to them, only about 40% of all companies really track the competence requirements that come with that changes. So we are not actually good at identifying, or most firms are not good at identifying the skill needs strategically. However, German firms do have a feeling and do realize that things are changing. And one example where we can see it is the area of soft skills. So what I did here is this slide shows some of the soft skills that German companies are looking for in skilled workers at the moment. So the competences I wrote in green are the ones that are considered the most important ones. So for example, the sense of responsibility or the ability to work in a team are things German firms are really looking forward to. The ones I wrote in yellow are somewhat important, but not as important as the ones written in green. And the red ones, you probably already guessed it, they matter less to German firms at the moment, which must not mean that, which does not mean that they won't matter in the future, but they do not matter that much now. However, all in all, the importance of soft skills has drastically increased in the past few years. And one example that shows this is from the area of vocational education. So vocational education is the basic training workers receive before entering the labor market. And it always is an indicator of what German firms think is really needed to have as a skill or competence to work in a specific profession. And For this chart I present here, we asked incompetent trainers and teachers in vocational schools about what they think are the most drastic or most important changes they experienced during the past 3 years. And a lot of them agreed that the teaching of self or social skills has become more important during the past years. So there's really a change happening here. And of course, for the ones that are still in the basic training, they have all the possibilities to achieve that skill right now. But what about the workers who were trained many years ago? How can they acquire the skill? And of course, the answer is continuing education and training. So what I present here is a pre-COVID situation. We have some conflicting data I found just yesterday. They came out just yesterday, so I wasn't able to incorporate it into my presentation today. I'm sorry about that, but still this data gives quite an impression about what happened pre-COVID, and it's still similar, I would say. Maybe not the same, but similar. And so in this pre-COVID data, we see that about 9 out of 10 companies, again, here there are some conflicting numbers in the internet from research institutes, but from what we know, about 9 out of 10 companies participate in continuing education and training, and enterprises invest in about 18.3 hours and spend about 630 euros per employee and year for further education. Again, this is an average value. We see some changes during the years. So for example, the participation in continuing education has increased recently, especially among older cohorts. During the COVID pandemic, participation in continuing education actually decreased in Germany. So these numbers are not the up-to-date thing. This is what I just said before. But one thing I wanted to present to you, because I think it may give you some insights that you can work with when expanding to the German market, is that my colleague, she conducted a survey in 2019, and she asked for the main reasons that hampered continuing education and training. And the firms said that some of them didn't have the internal capacities for organizing and planning continuing education and training. Some didn't have the capacities to give people time off from work, which is again, maybe one of the reasons for that may be the lack of skilled workers. Also, some of the companies we asked reported a lack of employees' interest, and some of them also said that there was no further need for continuing education, which we probably should question, because, as I showed before, most firms or some firms do not systematically identify which competence needs are arising now and in the future. And what I also brought is some ideas about what may help companies to ease those burdens, if you may call it that. So if firms are lacking internal capacities, maybe turnkey solutions where people do not have to invest that much anymore by themselves, but which they can easily implement in their companies, maybe a solution. If competencies, I'm sorry. If companies lack the capacities for further time off from work, maybe learning nuggets and on-demand content instead of on-site trainings would be beneficial. In order to work against the lack of interest, maybe gamification strategies or competitive learning may be a possible solution. Also offers with a lot of practical relevance, so people can see what they need, the things they learn for, and also certificates, because again, the German system is very degree based and very focused on certificates. And if you present workers with a certificate, this may increase their motivation to participate, because they have a piece of paper which they can show to employers and whoever wants to see it. And then, in order to work against the belief that there's no further need for continuing education, it could also be one idea to help German companies in identifying the competencies or even future competence requirements that are necessary for them now or in the future. So I will now stop sharing my screen because this was it for now. Thank you for your attention so far. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Paula. Before we move to Nirit, I just want to ask one question, which is maybe very, very basic. You know, you did mention something that is very much associated with the German culture and the legacy of the German industry for the last hundreds of years, the apprenticeship and the internship models that characterize the German market. One way of actually creating a change is also shifting this mindset. Is there any willingness to change this mindset, or is this mindset something that's given and we need to only work within the boundaries of this mindset?
I think some of it is given and some of it is changing already, as we heard also before from the founders that are already present in Germany. So there are some industries that are less traditional in a way. So this is what I meant when I said there are some of the like the design industry or also anything dealing with computers and internet and stuff. Those are, I think, the professions and sectors where the traditional approach is not that present anymore. But I think overall there's still the dual system is still very big here, and it's also something German firms are very proud of because it is one factor that also secures quality of training and is also a possibility for workers to have a certificate that really is so general that people can take the certificate and go like anywhere in the country and work there. So it's still a thing here. It's nothing you could just ignore when you come to the market.
Oh, okay, definitely. We can definitely speak about it for hours and hours. You know, some people jokingly were saying in Israel that if you have a first degree, you can be a waiter in a restaurant. And if you have a master degree, you can be a shift manager in a restaurant. So, but Nirit, let's stop the jokes and let's talk business. We are all ears.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I was speaking on mute. So Paula, thank you again. This is fascinating. And Yaki, what you're asking is, I think we didn't plan this, but I chose to bring the mirror perspective, right? So the question, not so much on what organizations need to do, but what on people need to do. So let me share my screen here. And I think the reason I actually think it's an interesting perspective. Paula, goes back to your, your summary that it is very difficult for us to know exactly what kind of professions and capabilities will be required. So companies are doing their best to try to forecast this and maybe putting in some systems in place to help people transition. But we also need people to shift their mindset from this is my profession because this is what I studied and got certified in, to actually ask what are my experience and capabilities and what can I do with them? So not so much who I am in terms of a professional standing, but what can I do in terms of what is possible in the new world? And so I did want to take us back a little bit and see how we do understand that in the last decade, pre-COVID, the world of work has already been changing, and some of the things that bind us to the old models of jobs and professions and the way we define them, they are already in transition. And so even if we don't quite see it in all of the different markets around the world, we still see it accelerating because of some of what COVID is doing and some other areas. And so hello to all of you. And I have been working with Intel for 30 years and researching the future of work for over a decade. And for me, for many years, 2020 was the future. I started looking towards 2020 back in 2007, 2008, which was the last big financial crisis we all had here. And we marked three big trends, mega trends that we said were evolving, some of which managers said would never happen, and yet they did. The first one was that everywhere is shifting to become the new location. So it was less about where you were and more about what you could actually do. And so we started seeing that, for example, people could work in different places. And that also meant that they could work in different offices. And again, I'm talking pre-COVID, right? So it's not just about the home, but also about co-working places or rather remote places that weren't necessarily the central office of the company. And we saw these emerge over the last decade. The second big megatrend we looked at was that work was shifting from being a job and a position with a company and an employer into something you do. And so if you could do something and somebody needed that something, if you could meet and exchange value, you had work. And so we started to see what was called the jobless recovery after the 2007 financial crisis, where we saw economic activity and growth, but not necessarily job growth, because people were starting to work with each other in ways that were different from a job within a company. In fact, in the US, we could see steady, in many countries around the world, a steady decline in salaried positions and a double-digit growth in what we called companies of 1 to 2 or 3 people. And the third big trend that was going on was that suddenly talent didn't need to be owned. So if you were a company and you needed something done, you didn't necessarily need to hire the people. You could go get it done in other ways. And so we saw, for example, over this decade, Amazon working to automate all of its back office processes. And instead of doing the old way where they would hire a bunch of engineers and put a structure in place and a budget, they basically opened an annual contest. And instead of calling it salary, they called it a prize, right? And they got whoever could do the job to do the job and paid them. So the idea that work is necessarily in the format of companies, jobs, and people and professions was starting to unbundle in the last decade, even before COVID came along and changed some of those rules for us. And so when we look at that, we could see that there was, if I needed to summarize this, when work is no longer a place you go to, it is something you do, is not semantics, because then the exchange of value isn't this is my job or this is my profession. It's actually, this is the value I bring. Who do I need to collaborate with to bring this value? How will, what are they calling it when they're asking for it? Who needs it? And then how will they know I exist? And so we're starting to see different systems in the space where people can actually make a living and create structures that are different from the other structures. And again, this is not about working from home. It's just about the idea that work is no longer a place. The second thing that we see when we analyze hundreds of millions of job openings over tens of millions of different kinds of professions is we see that what we call a hybridization of work. So we see professions that require prerequisites that didn't used to be there. So capabilities and skills that are shifting between worlds of professions. So for example, if 20 years ago, I could hire an engineer, put them in a dark corner with a screen and a keyboard, and it was just fine. And if I needed to go hire, for example, a marketing expert, right, then I would hire somebody that was a people's person and maybe creative and good with words. Today, if the marketing person can't work with data and the engineer can't work with people, they can't get a job. And so we see these capabilities spill over between professions, and we actually see about 60% of job prerequisites, so the things companies look for and value, that they're common across professions, and they're almost like the basic reading and writing, right, of the new era. And so when you look at your capability and your growth and some of the reason for why to take all these upskilling and reskilling, sometimes it's not about what is it that someone's going to need in the company where I work, but it's actually creating a T-shaped career, right? It's having that leg to stand on of what defines you as a professional, but also the breadth of perspective to understand what's coming, to understand how it gets affected by different things that are happening in the ecosystem, and making sure that you don't become irrelevant. And so I'm really good at a lot of things that nobody needs anymore. And the ability to actually shift over time is really, really important. And the third thing that we're seeing is that the structures of work, also of communication and other things, but also of work, are shifting from hierarchies to networks. So if in the past you were part of an organization where your boss, told you what to do and managed the work that you did, and your peers were the people you worked with, and maybe if you had employees, these were the people you would use. We see a lot more work getting done in teams today. And teams can be teams within the company. They can be across an industry. They can also be teams where people are coming in from as individuals from different structures and creating value. And so we're seeing people come together in different ways, working on things that are not necessarily managed by their manager or even by a single company, and creating economic value. We see it in the macroeconomic data. We see it in how people work. Even if you think about yourself and how you worked 10 years ago, you probably worked for work that your manager managed. Today, a lot of people are working a lot of their time on teams that are not managed by their manager, right? So these trends are changing how career paths are showing up. So in the old days, our lives were divided into 3 big segments, and we had, until the end of our 20s, we studied and we created our identity, our professional identity, and we accumulated that body of knowledge that defined who we were. And with that, we walked into the workplace, and we could enter, that door of this company we got hired with, and look up and look at the ladder and see our manager and their manager and their manager, and we knew what career would look like. And we knew that one day somebody would call us into a room with some pastries and maybe, drinks, and they would call it development. And another day they would call us into another room and they'd give us a new job, maybe a promotion. And we'd wake up in the middle of our lives and discover we're, deep experts in something, or maybe managers, and we could coast until the end, kind of that third period of life, where we would retire, receive a pension, could do nothing and live off that, which doesn't exist anymore, right? This model is no longer possible, because you cannot assume we can accumulate a body of knowledge in our 20s and be able to work with it for 40 years. So knowledge changes so fast these days that the half-life of knowledge that used to be about 30 years, which means by the time you retired, half of what you learned was irrelevant, is now more around 7 years. So you need to, learn, unlearn, and relearn many times, and then redefine who you are professionally. And so what we really want to do is create a career path that leaves time for us to work, but also to learn, and then also to bring in those things that we used to delay to some day when we retire, which will probably be much later than it used to be. And so I'm kind of, just to sum this up, COVID came into this already changing world, and forced us not to ignore these changes. It also forced us into a gym. You go to the gym, you don't exercise the muscles you have, you exercise the muscles you need to build. And so the world is changing. It was already changing, and it's going to bring us surprises that it was already doing that. But some of us were sitting comfortably in our chairs and professions and assuming that it will not touch us. And we were asking questions like future fit, how do I make sure my job is always safe, which is not the right question to ask these days. And so when you really want to do this, try to figure out how do you actually deal with all this, and not so much about who you are professionally, but what is it possible for you, then I have some, really quick tips that we see when we look at the research. The first one really is to understand that the changes will come, no matter what profession you're in, no matter where you work and what you do. What you really need to understand is how that meets your area, your company, your industry, your profession. How do you work with technology, next to technology, for technology? How do you stay relevant, right? So it's no longer the profession you work for or the company you are in, but it's really your ability to stay relevant by learning to do that, right? The second thing we know is that we're seeing this shift from thinking about yourself in terms of roles and responsibilities, so those narrow boxes of this is mine and this belongs to someone else, to actually ask, what are my skills and experiences? How do I build out those skills and experiences so that and then who else needs them, right? So there may be a lot of jobs out there that people need what you know how to do, but they're calling it something different. And being able to really translate who you are professionally from the titles that you used to connect with to your potential is really important. The third one, obviously, is creating, like I said, width on top of depth. So not just knowledge. So it's not so much about what you know, it's about who you know that knows and how you can bring those people and how do you can form those partnerships. And so really capabilities. And then staying updated, right? Learning, unlearning, relearning, staying updated on what's core for whatever it is that you're working in, understanding the shorter shelf life of knowledge, and then the modularity, right? Not so we talk a lot about what companies need to be doing. It's also how do we get the employees to participate, right? How do we get them to actually leave some of those safety nets and jump in to learn the new things and then maybe into the new jobs? And what happens if they don't? So really bringing learning in modules that people can work and learn at the same time, or creating structures where people can scale work back so that they can learn. A lot of times we say learning is important, but we do not recognize for learning. We recognize for work, good work done now. And so we're not really helping people make up time for development. We do see, and I think Yaki alluded to that, we see that learning isn't necessarily certifications in the old definition. So we might need to redefine our certifications. And so sometimes there are a certain packaging like degrees or certifications that we used to create for the old days, but they're not valued today by employers, or they will lose value. And so helping people create the learning across what used to be prior worlds of knowledge is important. And so we really need to learn how to do that. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of elements into this world that are no longer protected by what used to be the gatekeepers, right? The truth and the wrong and the ethics and the compasses by which we all navigated are changing. And so really learning isn't just about hardcore learning to code. Sometimes it's about what is the new role of social studies and humanities and ethics and philosophy, and how do we help people consume this new world, not just build it, right? And so there's not to forget those other areas of the worlds of learning that we sometimes oversee, but what makes us human in a technology world is going to be even more important than the technology itself. We have to remember that. That's kind of what I had for us today. Let me take us off, if I can figure out how. Yep.
Neat. Thank you very much for that. You know, you could have left that slide, no problem. But, you know, we had from Paula what small to medium businesses needs to do. Now, you're telling us what the individuals needs to do. Now, again, I go back to this maybe cultural differences or maybe some cognitive dissonance that sometimes you have, like, yes, I've developed new skills, but when I meet someone, they say, okay, what is your diploma? And I shake the hand and I say, that's my diploma. And, you know, they don't necessarily give me the opportunities to speak about that, or the other way around. When you actually try to, when everybody agrees that the workforce has changed, and there is a lot of instability and a lot of unknown in the air, much more than ever. I remember, you know, we were in 2019, we were discussing the future of work. COVID was not part of this future. But certificates, degrees, they need years to develop. They need years to shape and form. for new professions or changes in profession, etc., there are no certificates of degrees, because by the time that those certificates will be, there might be that the work will change again. So, with this, I think that we saw part of this dissonance when Paula, when you showed your slide, when you said everyone agrees that they need to train or their workers, but about 40% say that they actually don't need to have training. Does this maybe implies that what is required in Germany is not only to address the corporates, but also things that are more like self-help, self-improvement, self-fulfillment, workshops, seminars, whatever that happened, that were very popular in the US like 10, 15 years ago, but maybe they should be very popular these days in Germany. What do you think about that, Paula?
I'm not sure if I actually got the question right. I think most people do understand that they have to do something. They are still reluctant to do it somehow, and maybe they don't. Some of them maybe have the same difficulties like the companies have, and they don't know which direction they have to move towards. And yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that actually.
But I was referring more to the to this trend that was, I think, was very visible in the States, like maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, about self-improvement, going after the Deepak Chopras and the Tony Robbinses in the 70s, etc., that you would go and discuss more about the individual rather than discuss the corporate. And is this something that is required as, let's say, a cultural change within people, not necessarily within corporates in Germany?
I think maybe it's both. I think some of the people still don't know that they have to keep learning all their lives, but I think normally they would have to know it by now. But some, like I already said, are still reluctant to do it. I'm also a bit confused now by Simon's question he put in the chat, how those perspectives relate to jobs like nursing and geriatrics, which become much more relevant in the future due to demographics.
Maybe I can try. It's this example where we always have these questions on specific jobs, and so yes, the need to take care of people, for example, all sort of care jobs will grow. The how we do them and what the content of those jobs will be will probably likely change. And even now with COVID, we're seeing how technology is creating or changing through these jobs, because we had to create more distance, for example, in remote care. And we also sometimes can take jobs and we can take pieces of jobs away and do them in other ways, right? Many years ago, for example, you needed a doctor to conduct an X-ray. Today you have a technician, and tomorrow you'll have a computer to identify what the results are. And so the question isn't so much if the jobs will change, but I think what we're trying to talk about is who owns adapting to those changes, right? So I think what Yaki is challenging us to ask, right, is do the people need to go educate themselves so that they can fill in the jobs of the future or the professions of the future, or are companies responsible, or maybe maybe it's the national responsibility, right? Or even employer or unions, right? Look across jobs and have the ability to do that. And so we know there are many layers to that question on how do we make sure people are ready for these jobs. And I don't think it's an or, I think it's an and, right? So I think what Paula is showing, and we're seeing this in the automotive industry in Germany right now, right? The shift to electrical cars is creating changes. In fact, it's creating many jobs redundant. So many people who are physically welding on the lines are no longer have jobs. And then who owns changing them so that they can go do some of the computer-based or technology-based jobs? And so the answer is both, because the company can put in the courses, but if the people don't participate, then at some point the people will become irrelevant and the company won't have talent to do the work. And so you really need everyone to come together. And you also need the national perspective, right? Because
so I think one point that I would like to bring up before we have to wrap up in some minutes, what we discuss usually when doing here our work in the Israel Economic and Trade Mission, we have also to bridge the cultural gaps. This is one of our jobs, and one kind of buzzword that always comes up is that Germans are much more risk averse than Israelis are. And for example, when it comes to founding a company, but I think also what Paula presented, that there is still a great focus on diplomas. This is also kind of a risk aversity, because these diplomas provide some security, at least seemingly. So, and the question is how to build up this trust without having these certificates. And I mean, when it comes to nursing and for example, the medical sector, everyone appreciates a certified person because trust between people is not enough there. But on the other hand, people obviously are often much more capable to do much more than what is written in the diplomas, and they also do it on their jobs, right? So the soft skills are not written down in the diplomas usually, but they are highly evaluated and much more requested now. So this is maybe also kind of a path towards skills that are not actually written down in diplomas, right? And I don't know how you see this point, Paula, because you also presented that there are soft skills required. They are not certified, obviously, in the same way. No, we have to wrap up very soon. Maybe I don't know if you can share one last thought on this before wrapping up.
Yeah, I can do that just very briefly. So nursing is maybe not the best example because there are actually legal restrictions to that. So there would be like laws that would have to change in order to make a change happen in there. But there are other occupations outside of nursing where that cultural change is, I think, already starting. And yeah, some jobs already start relying less on those certificates, but it's a two-way responsibility, like Nirit just said. It's on the one hand side, the employers get some security out of the certificates because they know what they hire, and on the other hand, also the employees get some security from it because they have something they can present. And as long as both sides value this system that much, I think the cultural change will still need some years, but I think we already see that it's starting in some places and slowly. But I think there's something on the rise, and maybe in some years, certificates will maybe be less relevant. However, I don't see no relevance for any certificates coming. So I think certificates will still be a thing in the future. Maybe less, but still.
Great. Thank you for these final insights. I don't know. Yeah, we have to wrap up now. I think this was a very interesting start of a discussion because we brought together both the industry side that where we learned how much the focus on certificates and traditional training is still in place, and on the other hand, we have the flexible, agile, and innovative workforce that is more and more required. And yeah, we will be very happy to further engage in this discussion and bring together the Israeli and the German perspective to create synergies between both countries. And it was a great pleasure listening to all the input and having you connected. And thank you also to our audience. Stay tuned for further activities, and please don't hesitate to get in touch. And maybe Yaki, you want to say a final word, and then we can wrap up.
Just thank you, everybody. It's been a real pleasure. I know that we could have continued the discussion for hours and hours. It's always very intellectual, very, eye-widening. So thank you very much for that. And until next time.
Wonderful. So nice holidays for the Christians and the Germans that are around the corner, and Happy New Year to all of you, and looking forward to connect and engage in further discussions in 2022. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.